So before I jump into this video, I just want to point out that as far as I'm concerned, none of this excuses Malehya for what happened to Lily and Jack. And it certainly doesn't excuse her for her silence over the past 7 months. It may, however, help us to understand better how we reached this point, and also for those people who were close to Lily and Jack, those people who truly cared about Lily and Jack. I'm not talking about Martells and Mackenzies, but those people who truly cared about Lily and Jack and who are now perhaps questioning, could I have done something beforehand? Did I do things wrong? What could I have done differently? This may offer some amount of comfort, I guess, for these people in terms of understanding how hard it is in situations like this for people who are on the outside to be able to make a difference. That said, I don't believe that this excuses those people who were still allowed to be part of Jack and Lily's lives for their lack of action. Particularly individuals whose professions meant that they should have been easily able to identify signs of neglect, signs of abuse with these children. People who see this regularly in their workplace and who perhaps, let's say as a nurse, were mandatory reporters. It shouldn't matter if these children were their grandchildren. In fact, it should matter more. They should have reported the situation to CPS and done everything in their power to make sure that these children were not being neglected, were not being abused. Now, before I continue, I should apologise for the fan noises in the background. Seems like summer has finally arrived here, so fans have become pretty much essential. So, as you can tell by the thumbnail, in this video, I'm going to be discussing the isolation that was imposed on Malehya by Daniel. I actually originally set out to create a video where I was talking about all the signs of coercive control and abuse in their relationship. But after sitting down and going through various transcripts, documents, news articles, etc., I realised just how much there were. So I thought tackling the issue of isolation was probably number one in terms of making a video, because it is pretty much the keystone of a coercive, abusive relationship. There are, however, multiple elements that go into the sort of relationship that Malehya and Daniel had. A lot of them intersect, so some of the elements that I'm going to mention will come up in this video. So before I narrow in and start talking about isolation, what all the different elements actually are. So like I said, first of all, you have the keystone of this, and that is the isolating someone from their support system, from their family, from their friends, and in some respects, from their work colleagues, if their work colleagues are friends in a way. They may monitor their activities through the day, so they might have a tracker on their phone so they know where their phone is at all times. They might ring them several times through the day to see what they are doing, or send them text messages and expect immediate responses. They will most likely quiz them at the end of the day. If they've been at work and they come home, they're probably going to quiz their partner on what they've been doing all day. Have they gone anywhere? What have they done? They're going to limit their freedom and their autonomy. So it comes back to the isolation. They're no longer allowed to see particular friends or particular family reasons. And the partner will give a really good reason for this, or it may just be threats. You have to choose me or them. they may well deny them autonomy. So every decision they make has to be run through their partner first. Every decision they make has to be approved by their partner first. Then you get them limiting their access to money and controlling the finances. I had a friend who worked casual hours, and every Sunday when she got home, her husband would check her pay, work out how many hours she'd worked, and make sure that she was handing over the right amount of money, and then he would basically control the money. So she had to ask for money for fuel to get to work. She had to ask for money for groceries. And if she spent $10 more on groceries than she should have, that was just not good. You can pretty much guarantee that there's going to be gaslighting, because the moment that they try and say, look what you're doing to me, this is not fair, it's going to be turned back on them. Because the partner who wants to be in control is not going to like that. So they're going to put it back on the other person and gaslight them. A classic example of this, if you followed the Gabby Petito case, this is a case from about 4 years ago now, and her partner Brian was seriously controlling, and they were travelling around America, and he had her convinced that she had OCD, because if she complained because he got mud all through the back of the van, that was her having OCD. It wasn't him being inconsiderate and not cleaning off his shoes first before he got in the van. And then, of course, you get the name calling and the criticism. Usually it doesn't start off as severe criticism. Usually it starts chipping away and then escalates to the point where it is severe criticism. You are just so lazy. You never listen. The reason these children are like this is because of you, because you're a bad parent. This is the sort of things I'm talking about. The expectation that their partner is going to take care of all domestic duties. I've been at work all day. I shouldn't have to cook dinner. I shouldn't have to do the dishes. They're your children. You should be the one that's bathing them and putting them to bed. You should be the one who's making sure that dinner is cooked so that they are fed. And any attempt to try and get help with these domestic duties are going to be met with a guilt trip. You know, maybe something like suddenly their sore back has flared up because you expected them to do the dishes this one night because the baby had a fever and you wanted to look after the baby. And then there's the chipping away at your relationship with your children. Usually the way that works is it starts by them being overly critical of your weak parenting skills. So they pressure you to become stricter in your parenting skills, and it's not a natural state for you. And this creates a clash between you and your children that your children become resentful of. It undermines your parenting, prevents you from being an effective parent, and it creates this resentment from your children because they feel that you are being overly harsh. Ironically, somehow these abusers then turn around and take on the discipline of the children and do the overly harsh discipline, and the children respond to that, but that's out of fear. They'll also criticise you directly in front of your children, so that your children start to learn that you're a failure, and your children start to take that on board. You know, oh, this dinner is disgusting. You've put too much salt in this. Didn't anyone ever teach you how to cook? Those sorts of things. And of course the controlling aspects of your health and your body. Don't eat that. You already are having trouble fitting into that dress. Do you really need those medications? I think you can get by perfectly fine without them. That sort of thing. And this is something that very much plays into this element of isolation. So it's something I will be addressing in this video. But it is making jealous accusations about time spent with family or friends, if you are fortunate enough to be allowed to spend time with family or friends. So in Malehya's case, for example, we hear that she had regular FaceTime calls with Cindy. You can bet that there were limitations on how long they could go for, and after each one of those FaceTime things, if they went over time or something, there would be accusations like, she's more important to you than me, or you think it's more important to speak to your mother than to actually make sure your children are properly fed, or to make sure that you've actually wiped down the kitchen benches or vacuumed the house or something like that. And of course, regulating your relationship in the bedroom. It's all on his terms, basically. And if you don't perform the right way, you're made to feel guilty. And then there is the ultimate form of control. Using your children or your pets as a way to control you. It may be, well, if you want to keep taking those medications, then we're probably going to have to get rid of your dog because we can't afford to feed it and buy your medications. And the classic one that you hear so often, if you think you're going to leave me, just know that I will make sure you never get to see your children again. When you combine all these elements in a relationship, that's when it becomes a situation that a person just cannot get out of. And like I said, the keystone for all of this is the isolation. So let's home in on that. So I very rarely delete people's comments or block them on my channel. One of the things that's going to get your comment deleted pretty quickly and potentially get you blocked is when people turn around and try and blame Belinda for not being in the children's lives for the 2.5 years before they went missing. And they put it all on her. Well, she could have seen them if she wanted to. No, that's not how this kind of thing works. Belinda really had no control over this situation. When someone isolates their partner, there's a number of things at play here. Usually it begins with physical isolation, moving them away from their support network. In Malehya's case, it meant moving her out to 1407 Gairloch Road. Looking at the Gabby Petito case, it meant them heading off on their road trip around the United States so that Gabby was far away from her parents. But even before they headed out on that road trip, Brian had done the same to her. They had moved in with his parents. Because by moving the partner in with your family, not only are you removing their support network, but you're moving them in with people who are naturally going to be your number one fans and who are going to basically side with you pretty much every time. So for Malehya, not only was she taken away from her family and friends, but she was taken to the property where Daniel had Janie to back him up on everything. Malehya and her children would have always been outsiders on that property because at the end of the day, it was Janie's home. So they had to toe the line. Janie talks about them living there rent-free, and all Daniel had to do was fix fences and do stuff like that. That is part of the isolation. Well, we can't afford to move anywhere else. We're rent-free here. And all I have to do is fix fences and things. And you have to do the housework because I'm doing all these jobs that allow us to stay here for free. So you've got that geographical isolation. The other thing that comes with this geographical isolation, particularly if they've moved you into their parents' home, is that it becomes a place that is not a welcoming location for your families and friends because it's technically not your home. Yes, you are living there, but it still remains, in this instance, Janie's home. So that made it so much easier for Daniel to discourage Malehya having visitors there. And Malehya would have been given so many subtle reminders of the fact that this was Janie's home that for her it would have felt unnatural, it would have felt uncomfortable to consider inviting anyone to visit her there on that property. So how do you isolate someone from their friends and families? If you are the partner in a relationship, there's ways of doing it. First of all, there is the guilt and the ultimatums. You have to choose between them and me. But as the relationship progresses, there may be a point where that is not enough. So the other thing that they do is that they undermine your relationship with anyone who could be a threat to their ability to control you. At the end of the day, the goal is to basically isolate someone from the outside world so that they're not connected with the outside world. They're not seeing that things aren't right in their relationship, and they don't have that sounding board of the people who are close to them, the people that would offer them support, or the people who would point out those elements of a relationship that are not right, the people that might encourage you to challenge the things that aren't right or help you escape that abuse. So what they do is they gradually work on changing your perception of these people. They highlight anything that you may say that could be a negative trait in these people. And they convince you that these negative elements in your relationship with someone are actually 1,000 times worse than what they actually are. Classic example of this, we hear Daniel so many times being really critical of Cindy. And the way he talks about Cindy, you would think she was probably the worst mother in the entire world. Chances are this is not true. Chances are there were cracks in the relationship between Cindy and Malehya, and Daniel exploited that to the point where it eroded the relationship between Cindy and Malehya. They find things about your family and your friends that in the past may have been something that was of no concern to you whatsoever, but they convince you that those things are bad things that make that person a bad person. The little things suddenly become insurmountable differences, insurmountable issues. And if you have a difference of opinion with your friend or your family member, they are going to turn that into something massive. So that what happens is those relationships with the people who are closest to you suddenly become extremely strained because they've done a thing in your mind that has basically affected how you relate to those people, affected how you see the things that those people say and do. And it means that you are not going to go to them and confide in them over things that aren't right in your relationship. Because suddenly that person is a bad person, someone that you're not going to want to reach out to. But that's only one part of the control. What they do also is they make you feel guilty if you try and go behind their back. So if you want to try and see your best friend and have lunch with them, you're going to have to lie to your partner about it. And you're going to feel guilty about it. Quite often what happens is that the guilt reaches the point where you end up saying, yeah, I went and had lunch with my best friend. Suddenly you've just blown that to smithereens. Of course, there's also the element of being tracked on your mobile phone. Chances are, if you were planning on having lunch with someone, you've probably already had to run it by your partner already and had to say it was someone else completely. And you can guarantee they're going to ring you or send you a text while you are with that friend. You can guarantee they're going to question you about it afterwards. That's when the guilt comes in. I've mentioned before about my best friend that I grew up with. We were best friends from the time we were 8, well into our 20s. And then she got into a relationship with a guy that we both knew from when we were in our early teens. And they eventually got married and had children together. But when they first got together, he told her I was a bad influence on her. He didn't want her to see me because I was a bad influence on her. And she actually told me this. He believes you are a bad influence on me because of this thing. And she believed. All it was at that particular time, I had a business. I had a number of staff under me, and I would do Christmas parties for them. Now, because these were mostly uni students, part-time casuals, the idea of the Christmas party was basically, you guys come to my house, you can park your cars somewhere safe, leave your cars here at the house, you can crash out on the couch, on the spare bed, anywhere. We've got mattresses, like blow-up mattresses for you. You can crash out here at my house if you are going to drink too much. I will provide the alcohol for the party because I am your boss. And that's what happened. My best friend's partner, she came to the party because she'd been sort of involved with my business a little bit. She knew my staff. He said, look, she encourages these young uni students to drink. So she's a bad person. And my best friend believed it. And from that, I was a bad influence. She wasn't allowed to see me anymore. We met for lunch one time when her daughter was really little, like she was still a baby, I think, and she was pregnant with her second child. And he rang her while we were at lunch. And she shushed me in the restaurant, told me not to speak while she was on the phone. And she told him that she was at lunch with a netball friend. This is someone who had been my best friend for 20 years. But she was willing to throw away our friendship, and she shushed me in a restaurant because she didn't want her partner to know that she was having anything to do with me because I was a bad person. I was a bad influence. And yes, she did finally admit to him that she'd met with me for lunch, and surprise, surprise, after that I didn't hear from her for something like 10 years or so. The other way of creating this isolation is limitations, such as having one shared vehicle. And with that one shared vehicle, you can bet that there's probably rarely much fuel in that vehicle, so that you can't just go for a drive somewhere. Because in order to go somewhere, first of all, you would have to ask for money to put fuel in the vehicle and then explain why you want to go somewhere. And there is that limitation on finances. You can bet that Daniel controlled the finances because he was the one who worked. So all their money probably went into one account that he controlled. And she had to ask anytime she wanted to spend money. In the documents, there is a mention where Daniel said that Malehya he'd been outside working or something, and she had rang him or asked him something about McDonald's toys. You can bet that was her asking permission for when they went into town to buy the children a McDonald's toy. And then you get the threats and the emotional abuse. You know, you need to choose between them or me. If you really want our relationship to work, you need to make that choice. Or, aren't I enough for you? Do they mean more to you than me? That sort of thing. And then you get the manipulation using a child. It may be a situation where they say, look at all these negative things about this person. I don't want them near our child. You will notice Janie talks about Cindy taking one or other of the children for visits. You never hear her talking about Cindy taking Meadow for a visit. And I can bet you that never occurred and was never allowed, because that would have been part of the control thing for Daniel. He would have made sure that Malehya understood that he didn't feel that Cindy was the right person to have around his daughter. And then there's the ultimate bargaining chip. If they think that you are leaning towards spending more time with family and friends, they're going to suggest that this is possibly the end of the road for the relationship, and that if that is the case, if you want to leave me, fine, but you are never going to see your child again. That is one of the classic bargaining chips that you see in these sorts of relationships. You know, my best friend is a qualified nurse. She's a professional. She is highly intelligent. She went to some of the top private schools. And yet, when she wanted to leave her husband, he had her convinced that he had the power to prevent her from ever seeing her 5 children again. He told her he was going to move to another state, he was going to get a really good lawyer, and she was not going to see her children again. And despite us trying to explain to her, no, that's not how the law works. You are their mother. You are probably going to get the first say. You are working, he's not. But he had done such a number on her that she believed him. She believed that he really did have the power to do that, to prevent her from ever seeing her children again, that he would be able to get full custody, even though he didn't work, and that he would take them away to another state and she wouldn't see them ever again. So how do we know that this is what Malehya was experiencing? Okay, I have several audio clips that I'm going to go through, and I have a number of text messages at the end that I'm going to go through, just to show you exactly how this all ties together.
When she wanted the car, she would drive Daniel to work. She would go do what she had to do. She would even bring Daniel his lunch. she would come home. Then she would go back in the evening and pick Daniel up. So she was free to go whenever she wanted to go.
So I thought I should tackle this argument first, because not only have we heard it from Janie, but I've seen people making this argument in the comments section. He was working. She had access to a car. She could have left any time she wanted. That's not what the issue was here. There seems to be this belief that because she had the free will and she had access to a vehicle, so therefore she could leave any time she wanted, it seems that people think that this is the argument that proves that she wasn't isolated. Her being free to leave anytime she wanted. First of all, you saw that brick wall that I built at the beginning. I did that to illustrate how hard it is for someone to get out of one of these relationships. You can't just walk out the door and leave. It doesn't work that way. There are so many obstacles in place that make it really hard for someone to do that. Having access to the vehicle and being able to leave doesn't mean that she wasn't isolated, because she still wasn't able to see her friends. She still wasn't able to communicate with friends and family members. He still had full control over that. You can bet that Daniel had full control over when they put fuel in that vehicle and how much fuel they put in that vehicle. When Malehya got her vehicle in April, you can bet that he was controlling the finances in terms of how much fuel could be put into that vehicle and when fuel could be put into that vehicle. Having the freedom to leave a relationship, like I said, it would be very, very hard to do. But having the freedom to leave a relationship is not the same as being isolated from your friends and family while you are in that relationship. While Malehya was living on that property, while she was in a relationship with Daniel, she was isolated. So what if she was allowed to have his car on some days and drive him to work and use the car through the day? You can bet that whatever it was that she used that car for was something that she had to have his permission to do. Oh, Meadow's got a doctor appointment. Yes, I'll let you use the car today. Oh, you want to go buy a new pair of shoes for you. Do you really need that pair of shoes? We can't afford a new pair of shoes today. No, I'm just going to take the car to work myself. Note, Janie mentions that, in those situations, Malehya would take lunch for Daniel. That was part of the control situation. You can bet that the arrangement was basically, if she had to do something in town that day, she would drive him to work. She would get the kids sorted, and then she would have to go and take him lunch, because that way she was checking in with him. He'd be able to make sure that she was playing by the rules, essentially. You can also bet that on those days when she was allowed to have the car, that he probably rang her or texted her additional times throughout the day. And you can bet he kept tabs on her phone location throughout the entire day. If she diverted to somewhere that wasn't approved, he would have asked about it when she picked him up. How come you were out at Bible Hill? Why did you go to Paddy's today? Or how come you went to this location? Who were you meeting with?
So, if anybody thinks that Malehya was isolated, she had every chance in the world to go wherever she wanted. That's all she had to do was ask Daniel for the car, and Daniel gave her the car. And there in April, she bought a car on her own. So if she wanted to leave, she could have left in April. She could have left any time she wanted. She knew me. She knew if she wanted to leave and Daniel put up a fuss, she knew that I would step in and make her go, or let her go. I would not stop her from leaving. Even though Daniel's my son, that's the time I would step in. So, people can't say that she didn't want to leave here because she was isolated, that she couldn't go anywhere. That's a bunch of bull crap. And she had the use of my vehicle too, whenever she wanted it. So, if people think that she didn't want to live here because she was isolated, if that's what she's telling everybody, well, or if that's what you're hearing, that's a bunch of bull crap. And if she did want to leave, and I wasn't around to stop Daniel from letting her leave, there's always 911. There's always a way out.
Like I said, Janie has completely missed the point there. Malehya was forced to choose between Daniel and her support network. So yes, she was isolated. By choosing to move in with Daniel down at Gairloch Road, she was isolated. And yes, you could argue, well, she made that choice. But that's how these relationships work. She made that choice based on promises. She made that choice based on the fact that they were having a child together. The promises I'll come back to. And even if she did decide she wanted to leave, the fact that she was isolated from her support network made that so much harder. When people want to leave a relationship like that, they might consider it 30, 40 times. They might even make preparations half a dozen times or more. But it's not easy because they've already lost most of their support network. So they don't have the support that they need to do that sort of thing. Let me know in the comments if you truly believe that Janie would have allowed Malehya to use her car. And note how she said that too. She said she had the use of my vehicle too whenever she wanted it. She's not actually saying that there was ever an instance when Malehya did use her vehicle. What she's claiming here was that if Malehya decided that she wanted to use Janie's vehicle, she would have been able to. I would love to have seen that theory proven. We've got a pretty good picture of what the relationship was like between Janie and Malehya. You can bet there's no way Malehya ever would have asked Janie, can I use your car for the day? Not a chance.
But that girl, she would get up in the morning, take Jack and Lily and the baby. She would drive Daniel to work. She would come back home, get the kids off to school, and then go back in and do what she had to do. She would go and take dinner. If she felt like she would take Daniel lunch. She would come back home in time to get the kids off the bus. Then she would go back in and get Daniel from work and then come back home.
Well, I feel exhausted just listening to that description. That tells us just how frequently this would have occurred. Malehya would have only been able to take that vehicle when she really, really needed it. Like I said, if Meadow had an appointment, if it was something that was beneficial for Daniel or beneficial for Meadow. Can you imagine the amount of effort that would go into having that car for the day for Malehya? Having to get the children ready earlier. Having to take Daniel to work, come back, get the children on the bus. Go out and do whatever it is you had to do and still make sure that you take a lunch for Daniel by the sounds of it. and then get back home in time to get the children off the bus, and then get them loaded in the car again so you can go and pick up Daniel. That sounds like something that, right there in itself, that shows you how difficult that would have been. I think we can be pretty confident that it was not a regular occurrence, particularly when you consider the amount of fuel that you would have been using doing that. Something that, like I said, Daniel would be very controlling over. I mean, we've seen in the last 7 months how controlling Daniel is, to the point where even though he's not doing himself any favours, he's still been coming out and talking to the media because he wants to control the narrative. Okay, so moving on from Janie and her, if she wanted to leave, she could, which is kind of not the point when you're talking about someone being isolated in a relationship. Being in a relationship and being isolated from friends and family is not the same as being in a relationship and either being not able to leave or able to leave. Not only are they two completely different things, but I think Janie's intention here is to point out that Malehya had the choice of being in a relationship with Daniel, which meant being isolated, or not being in a relationship with Daniel and being connected with friends and family. Funny thing is, that is the exact choice that Daniel gave her at the start. And since it seems that, somewhat sadly, Malehya is the kind of person who needs validation from being in a relationship, she really had no choice, because for her, apparently, she's not complete unless she's in a relationship. So let's look at just how Daniel managed to successfully isolate Malehya.
Things started to change when she met Daniel.
Okay.
That she had told us about meeting him, and that she did believe it was going somewhere, so I was happy for her.
Mm-hmm.
And I told her, well, as long as he makes her happy, because kids are happy if mom's happy.
Yeah.
And we kept in communication that the kids' birthdays and Christmas, that she was staying with her grandmother at that time in Truro.
Yeah.
So we would go there to drop off the kids' birthday gifts or Christmas gifts and visit with them. Then we noticed that it started to change a bit.
And what kind of change did you notice in her?
She started to get distance. That the last visit she had them here, that was in the summer before Jack's birthday, so that probably would have been around July or August.
Mm-hmm.
She did make the comment that it bothered Daniel coming to visit us. That he assumed that she was coming so she could run into Cody. And I thought, well, I mean, they're only young, so we made it clear that, look, if he's got a problem, bring him too.
Do you think that the reason why you haven't seen him in the last 2 years is because of that?
I do feel it's because of him. I do. I mean, she was coming all the time up until she got with him.
So naturally, the family of the former partner are going to be first in the firing line. Now, Cody wasn't living there at that point in time, and Daniel would have been full aware of that. But that wouldn't have mattered to him. In his mind, it was still a connection with Cody while she was still visiting Belinda and her family. Of course, Belinda saying, if he's got a problem, bring him too, kind of broke the rules a little bit. Because what should have happened, in his mind, this is normally how it happens with people who are the controlling person in this situation, Belinda should have given him further reason to put his foot down and say, see, she's not the sort of person you should be visiting. It would have been easier for her, rather than to be kind about it and say bring him along too, for her to turn around and say, look, just tell him Cody doesn't live here. Tell him I'm their grandmother and they need to see their grandparents. That would have been something that he could have twisted to suit his narrative, to make them look like bad people somehow. Now, it didn't occur to me to ask Belinda, but I'm going to guess that at this point in time, this was probably after Malehya had gone to court and gained full custody of the children. So I could imagine that had Belinda not tried to do the nice thing, had she instead said, well, I'm their grandparent, I still would like to see them, Daniel probably would have turned that around and said, this is Cody trying to take your kids off you. He would have played into Malehya's fears. The other thing he would have done would have analysed everything that Belinda said during a visit. So after a visit, he would have quizzed Malehya about what happened, what they did, what Belinda said, and he would have found things to pick to make her look like a bad person. Because that's all what these people do to control. Because otherwise, it would have been easy enough for Malehya to go, yeah, okay, I get that you're a bit worried about me running into Cody, but, you know, I'd still like them to see Belinda occasionally. But what he would have done is to try and twist things in her mind to make Belinda a bad person. So completely innocent things that Belinda said or did, Daniel probably twisted them in Malehya's mind, and all of a sudden she's happy to go along with his desire for her not to have any contact with Belinda. In these kinds of situations, it's never a case of just going, I don't want you to go there and see them anymore because I know that's the children's grandmother, but she's also Cody's mother, and I don't want you to have that connection anymore. Because that's not going to be as powerful as basically working on her fears, convincing her that maybe Belinda was going to try and take the children away from her, or picking on harmless things that have been said or done while the children were in her company and blowing them into something that they're not.
It broke my heart when her and Cody didn't work. They were my picture-perfect family. It broke my heart. And Malehya made me feel it was okay. She'd come every couple of weeks with the kids. And then it slowly dwindled after she met Daniel. So yes, she was changing. I can't deny that. There was some changes.
It slowly dwindled after she met Daniel. And she was changing. So that just shows you exactly what I was saying there. You can bet that every time Malehya took the children to visit Belinda, that he would have found ways to undermine their relationship. He would have commented on things that had been said or done and made Malehya see them in a different light, which was actually a twisted reality. So he was basically messing with her brain and getting her to believe his version of things.
What do you remember about the kids?
Kids, they were happy.
Yeah.
Very happy.
Yeah?
Yes. Every time I seen them, they always lived at their grandmother's in Truro.
I got you. Okay.
Yeah. Well, at their great grandmother's.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
At Patty Carter's. That's where I used to go visit.
Okay.
Yeah.
What?
Until this guy moved him away, and that was the last time I seen him. Yeah.
When's the last time that you got to see Lily and Jack?
I seen Lily last year when she brought her up here. Yes, the last time I seen Lily.
Okay.
Yeah. That's when they took them pictures.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So at the time that the children went missing, it had to have been at least 5 months since their grandfather and their great-grandmother had seen them. Now, obviously, Malehya came from a broken home, so her father and her mother had separated long ago. Daniel would have preyed on those issues. And regardless of what Malehya's relationship was like with her father, Daniel probably would have seen him as the greatest threat. Because usually people like him who are controlling are afraid of bigger men. It concerns me that she only took Lily to see them. It worries me that maybe Jack had injuries that she didn't want them to see. And that's the other side of this. Part of the isolation would have been her not wanting to take her children to family members when they had visible injuries. Note also that Henry and Connie were reliant on Malehya bringing the children to visit them. They didn't have the option of rocking up to visit their grandchildren or to visit Malehya. I'm also willing to bet that Malehya's relationship with her father deteriorated after she got with Daniel, because he would have been in her ear about all the things that were wrong in her relationship between her and her father. And you see this so often in these kinds of relationships. It's really hard to isolate someone from their parents. So what the controlling person does instead is to undermine the relationship so that they become less reliant on their parents, less likely to confide in their parents.
I know Patty has been here a lot more times than Cindy, because Patty has never missed a kid's birthday party. And when Malehya and Daniel moved into the trailer, Patty came over more than Cindy ever did. And then a while after that, when Patty wasn't able to drive or didn't want to drive, her Hayden would come over to the birthday parties and drive Patty here.
So there's a few things to note here. First of all, when she's talking about Hayden, when Patty didn't drive anymore, Hayden would bring her over. You could bet that until that point in time, Hayden was not allowed access to Malehya. Janie's saying, well, you know, Patty was there so much more than Cindy. Let's break that down. Let's think about it. What was Patty to Malehya and Daniel? She was the cash cow. She had provided them with a roof over their head, first of all, when they first got together. And she was still giving Malehya money. So for Daniel, that was convenient. Clearly, Daniel got to know Patty enough to know that she wasn't going to be a threat to their relationship. The fact that she allowed them to stay at her house shows you that she was accepting of their relationship to some extent. So she's sort of the concession. She's the family member that is the least threat to his control over Malehya. It also sounds like she is the closest family member to Malehya in terms of emotional connections. So it would have been much harder for Daniel to undermine that and to have that separation occur. When it comes to Cindy, clearly there is already a history there between Cindy and Malehya. Things that weren't so perfect. So that Daniel would have undermined that. he would have done his best to undermine the relationship between Malehya and Cindy so that Cindy had less control over Malehya. Janie talks about Cindy only coming to the property so many times. She talks about Cindy not coming to birthdays. That would have all been Daniel's doing. He wouldn't have been able to completely cut Malehya off from her family. It seems like that is an impossibility in that family. So instead, he had to limit interactions. We've heard so much negativity from Daniel aimed at Cindy, and you can bet that comes from 2 or 3 years of basically delivering that to Malehya. Your mother is a bad person because she does this. Your mother is a bad person because she does that. For someone to maintain control in a relationship like this, they have to undermine a person's relationship with the people closest to them, family and friends. Like I said at the beginning of the video, yes, apparently Cindy was doing a FaceTime every day with Malehya. But you can bet that Daniel limited the amount of time that went for. And you can bet that was his concession in terms of allowing Cindy access to Malehya and the children without her actually coming to the property into his territory.
No, Malehya was not close to any of the neighbors. Nobody came here to visit Malehya, not even her friends, only her grandmother and her mother every now and then, and her half-brother, Hayden.
Janie's so good at slipping out things that she probably shouldn't say. She's trying to make it sound like Malehya is this standoffish person that, geez, even her friends don't come and visit her. And no, she's not formed any relationships with the neighbours. You can bet that she never had any opportunity to connect with any of the neighbours. You can bet that Daniel made sure of that. And you can also bet that she was not allowed to have any of her friends visit her on that property. And there are some text messages that confirm this, which I will get to shortly.
Yes, Cindy has been to this trailer, I would say, at least 3 to 4 times that I know of. And I've talked to the lady once since she's been here. She's never been to any birthday parties. When she does come over, she has taken the kids, I believe once, maybe twice, I'm not sure, taken them, both of them, but sometimes she only takes one kid at a time because she can't handle both of them at the same time.
I'm willing to bet that up until when Lily and Jack went missing, Cindy may not have actually ever set foot inside that trailer. Janie is saying that Cindy's been a handful of times and she'd usually come and collect one or both of the children and take them and then bring them back. It sounds like it was orchestrated in such a way that Cindy was not allowed inside the trailer because then she would have seen how Malehya was living. So she was still kept at arm's length. And Janie coming up with this thing of, oh, you know, usually it was just one kid or the other because she couldn't handle them. I'm willing to bet that over time those visits would have been wound down. Because Janie's saying, oh, it was only ever one kid at a time, or mostly one kid at a time because she couldn't handle them. That sounds like a classic strategy of, originally she was probably collecting the children, taking them for the day. Maybe they would come back and there would be a comment that something happened, who knows what, and Daniel would have gotten in Malehya's ear and got her convinced that you shouldn't let your mum take both kids at once. She can't handle them. Eventually, it would have reached a point where it was probably a case of you shouldn't let your mum take the kids. She just cannot handle them. So what we've learnt from Janie is that the only people allowed in Malehya's life were the people who were the least threat. So Paddy, Hayden, because Hayden was driving Paddy, and then Cindy. But Cindy, they still kept limitations on her access to Malehya and the children. I have no doubt that Malehya was prevented from taking the children to visit Cindy herself. It would have been a case of, no, look, I need the car that day. Or, no, we can't afford the fuel this week for you to drive all the way out there and back. There would have been reasons for Malehya not to take the children to Cindy herself. Cindy would have been expected to come and visit them herself, but to have to collect them and bring them back, so it was made as inconvenient for her as possible. Now, obviously what I'm saying here, I'm not saying that I know this is a fact. What I'm saying is that this is the pattern that you will normally see in these kinds of coercive relationships. Everything we know points to these things.
That because it's Malehya herself had stated that she couldn't see her friends because Daniel made her make a decision between them or him. She told me she couldn't see me because of Daniel. I couldn't know where they lived because of Daniel.
Now, when Belinda was having this particular conversation, she did say after that she suspected that maybe this was all Malehya's doing. Maybe Malehya was just blaming Daniel. But everything we are seeing here points to this kind of coercive relationship where Daniel would have given her the ultimatum. You choose your friends or you choose me. Where Daniel would have said, I don't want you going over, and I don't want you seeing her or allowing the children to see her, because they might end up taking the children off you for Cody. You know, things like that. I could see that happening. I believe that it was Daniel who prevented Malehya from seeing Belinda, who prevented her from seeing her friends, who limited how often she could see her mother, her father, her grandmother. So I'm going to finish by going through a number of text messages, and I'm going to start by actually showing you a transcript from that Turkey show recently when he was talking about Daniel's girlfriend that he had after he split with Malehya, because things that she has said certainly ring true in terms of what I'm just saying here in terms of his relationship with Malehya. So, like I said, this is the transcript from one of the shows that the Turkey guy did, and he is talking about his conversations with Daniel's brief girlfriend. And he says allegations because you know that this guy is in favour of Daniel. So her allegations against them that he was controlling. I'm not going to do the repetition here. Basically, she claims that he didn't want her to have male friends and that she had to delete co-workers off her Facebook and things like that. So that's just the tip of the iceberg. This is a girl who had been with Daniel barely any time at all, and he was already controlling who she could be with, who she could communicate with, who she could be friends with. Now, Janie said these two things because, of course, in Janie's world, she likes to make Malehya look bad. She wants to make Daniel look like he's done nothing wrong. So the first thing she says is, why did she leave there in the first place? She didn't have to leave Paddy's. She lived with Daniel there a year. Believe me, she knew what she was getting into by moving here. I find it alarming when she says, believe me, she knew what she was getting into. What exactly was she meaning by that? Because it makes it sound like, oh, well, she knew what Daniel was like. She knew what she was getting into when she moved here. She made that choice. And she adds, when you live in a town and move to the country, it's your choice. She wasn't forced to move here. It was her idea. Was it her idea? That's an interesting question. So Janie is basically putting this back on Malehya. Well, she could have stayed living with Paddy, but she made the choice to move here instead. She knew what she was getting into. She knew she would be isolated living in the country. But it's more than just the isolation of living further away from your friends and not being able to catch up with them as regularly as you would if you lived in the same town. It's the isolation of being completely cut off from your friends, of being told, choose them or choose me. Now I am going to come back and address some more elements of what was said there with Janie in a moment. But first of all, like I said, her choosing to move in with Daniel wasn't a case of just becoming further away from her friends but not having enough time to see them. It was complete isolation. And if you go down to the second line, towards the end of the second line, this is communication between Malehya and Sunny from A Crime and Shame. And she said, Daniel gave me an ultimatum when I was pregnant with Meadow to drop my friends or he would leave me because he said they were a bad influence. Heck, that sounds familiar. That is just like my best friend's partner telling her that me, who was her best friend for 20-something years, was a bad influence and she had to choose between him and me. I can see that happening. I can see Daniel doing that. Her friends are a bad influence. We know Cheryl's not backwards in coming forwards. So she wouldn't have put up with any crap from Daniel. And he knew that. So he needed to make sure she was completely off the scene, I would imagine. And she says, so I did. He allowed me to talk to one friend, but we didn't talk often. You can bet the one friend that she was allowed to talk to would have been whoever was the least assertive friend, whoever seemed like the least threatening for Daniel. That we didn't talk often, you can bet that she had to jump through hoops anytime she wanted to communicate with her friend. You can also bet that she had to go through the Spanish Inquisition after she had spoken to that friend or caught up with that friend every time. And at the top we have another message from Daniel where he said, me and Malehya never cheated on each other. We had full access to each other's phones. Of course you did. This is a classic situation, and we saw this mentioned in the documents as well, I believe. Classic situation where he basically says, yeah, you can have access to my phone so you know what I'm doing. That was pure manipulation, so he had an excuse to have access to her phone. Meaning he would have checked all her text messages, he would have checked who she'd been talking to. So as innocuous as it sounds, the truth here is that he made sure he had access to her phone so he could keep an eye on what she was doing. Now I have to confess here, I haven't actually asked Belinda's permission to use this message, but hopefully this is fine. I apologise, Belinda, if you're watching, but I do think this gives us a good understanding of the situation, because I had wondered what the reasoning was for leaving Patty's place. So Patty actually offered Malehya her house. And we had heard that early on, that Malehya was supposed to have Patty's house, but then Patty sold the house. This is what the situation was. Malehya could have had the house, but she had to either go back to school or get a job, meaning she had to be doing something with her life, which is fair enough. When she met Daniel, he told her she wouldn't have to work, so they moved to Janie's. That is classic manipulation, control, coercive control, all those things. Seems like Malehya wasn't big on taking responsibility. So, obviously for her, the prospect of actually going back to school or getting a job just so she could get a house seemed like too much effort. And well, hey, now she's got a house on the reservation. She doesn't even have to look after kids anymore. This gave Daniel the perfect opportunity to isolate Malehya from her family and friends. Here's the offer. You can have a house, but you've got to work or you've got to go to school. Or you can come and live with me and I'm not going to expect you to work. I'm going to support you and your children. And you can live with me and you don't need to worry about working just to have this house. You don't need to worry about going back to school to have this house. You can just concentrate on being a mother and being my partner. I get the distinct impression that for her entire life, Malehya has relied on other people to provide for her. She's never had to provide for herself. So, for her, this would have been a no-brainer. And given her lack of maturity, she probably just believed that Patty's house would always be there. So that down the track, if things changed, she could go crawling back and go, yeah, can I have the house now? Maybe she believed that Patty would eventually just go, look, come and have the house. Or maybe she was just so convinced that her relationship with Daniel was going to be a permanent one and that she would never need Patty's house because she had her own house that was being given to her where her and Daniel would live for free. And even after all this happened, Malehya said the same thing to Belinda in terms of putting it back on Daniel. Malehya, can I ask you a question? Why did you stop visiting with the kids? Just thought you needed time to convince Daniel he had nothing to worry about. I remember you said he thought you were coming because you wanted to see Cody, but I don't understand because we invited him too. And her response was he never wanted me to go and I never knew why he was controlling. Why didn't you give us your address? We would have gladly come for visits. He never wanted me to give it. I never wanted to stay there. Putting a bit of an excuse there, I never wanted to stay there. Well, clearly, she did want to stay there to some extent because she stayed there for, 2-3 years. She was happy to turn her back on friends and family for the sake of this controlling relationship. Clearly, by the time she realised that it wasn't so good, she was in a position where it was hard for her to get out. And we have the same thing here from Hayley in the documents. Hayley said she's stepsisters with Malehya, so Lily and Jack are her niece and nephew. Hayley said Malehya had cut out her family members and she had not seen Malehya or the kids in 2 years. So we have Belinda, Henry, Connie, Hayley, all saying that Malehya had either completely cut them out or that they'd barely seen her and the children. You have Janie saying, yeah, no, Malehya's friends never came round here. You have Malehya herself saying she was given this ultimatum. Forget about your friends, or forget about me. How did he get her there? Unfortunately, it was Patty's ultimatum, trying to make Malehya grow up and take responsibility. Unfortunately, that backfired, and instead Daniel was like, hey, come and live with me because you won't have to work. You will never have to work. I'll do the work. You stay home and just be a mum. Too appealing for someone like Malehya, and then everything was set in place. We even have accounts from Daniel's brief girlfriend that show him doing exactly the same thing to her. It is the classic beginning for a coercive, abusive relationship where you completely isolate someone from their friends and family, because they are the people who can point out to them that this is not normal in a relationship. They are the people that can be confided in when there's concerns, and they are the people that can step in when things are going badly. So by isolating someone from that support network, that allows all these other areas of coercive control and abuse to click into place. That allows things to reach the point where you have 2 children who've been missing now for 7 months and nobody is saying a word. Does this excuse Malehya? No. Because at the end of the day, when she saw that her children were being hurt, when she saw her children were being neglected, and she clearly played a part of that, she could have made a choice. But instead, she allowed her children to suffer, and she allowed whatever happened to these children to happen. Not only that, but let's call it what it is. She's been in hiding for the last 7 months. I don't believe that she has told the RCMP anything about what happened to her children. Based on that statement that she wrote, she is either off in La La Land and is just completely off the dial and has forgotten what happened to her children and is now living in some fantasy world, or she is continuing to lie and hide the fact that something horrible has happened to her children and that they are no longer around. Maybe at first she was afraid that she was going to lose Meadow if she spoke up about what happened. But guess what? She's lost Meadow. And while this case is open, while there is a question mark over her head, over Daniel's head, neither of them are going to get custody over Meadow again. So she has made the choice here. She's been free of this relationship for 7 months. And yet she is still putting Daniel over her own children. By staying quiet, she's protecting him rather than doing the right thing for her own children. So on that note, I'm going to finish there. Thank you for listening. Hopefully the fans haven't been too loud and annoying. If you are new to my channel, please subscribe. I would like to try and reach 7,000 subscribers by the end of this year, and I need your help to do that. Also, please hit the like button. That gets this video out there into the algorithm, gets it seen by more people, and helps me build my channel. It also, of course, gets Lily and Jack's story out there so that more people know about these children, that more people know their story. and we can continue to put pressure on to achieve justice for these children. Also, of course, please leave a comment below. Yes, I know I'm not so great at responding to everyone's comments. I do read them all. It's just there's not enough hours in the day. So on that note, thank you, and I will catch you in the next one.